Hello, my name is James Bezic and I'm a developer advocate here at AWS Serverless. In this short series of videos, I'm going to show you how to build and deploy the web application in the Ask Around Me blog series. You can read the companion AWS Compute blog post at the URL on the screen. In this episode, I'll show you how to set up the application after cloning the AWS samples repo. I'll walk through the deployment of the backend SAM templates and configuring Auth0. By the end of this video, the front end will run locally on my development machine. In this video, I'm going to show you how to deploy the Ask Around Me app, both the front end and the back end applications. The first thing to do is to clone the GitHub repo. So go to the URL shown in the URL bar at the top there. Now you'll need to meet some of these requirements. So you need to install some software like the SAM CLI and the Node.js runtime along with Vue.js. And you'll need to sign up for a Google Maps API key and a free Auth0 account. Once you have those things, we can move on to the installation instructions. And the first thing to do is to install the real-time stack, which is a SAM deployment on the back end. So I'm going to follow along those instructions, but in my VS IDE. So I'll git clone that repo for now, and on the left-hand side, you can see the directory structure that's now been cloned into my IDE. So I'll just cd into the backend directory and run sam deploy-guided using the real-time YAML template. The -guided is a new feature in SAM that allows you to specify the parameters at the point where you deploy the application. So I'm going to use a stack name of Ask Around Me real-time. And my region is US East 1. Yours might be different. Then I'll accept the rest of the defaults to start the deployment. Now this just takes a couple of minutes to completely deploy. Once it's finished, you'll see a successfully created message that shows the stack has now been successfully created in your AWS account. Now it's useful to have a notepad open here just to capture some of the variables we'll be using during the deployments. So the first thing is I need to know the IoT endpoint that was created during that stack. So I'm just copying that, and I'll keep that in my notepad for reference later. The next thing is I need the identity pool that was created in the Cognito configuration. So that's that first ID there I'll be copying. So the next step is to run the Dynamodb Setup part of the configuration. So what we'll do is we'll cd into the setup directory, and I'll run npm install. It just runs through the package.json script that's in that directory and installs all the components that are needed. Okay, next we will just run that node setup script and provide it the region as a parameter. And what this is doing is it's setting up the Dynamodb geohash library, where it has its own Dynamodb table that's managed outside of the main stack. This just takes a minute or two to set up, but once it's ready, then that component is ready to go. Okay, so next what we need to do is get the stream ARN of that Dynamodb table. So we'll just run this CLI command, and you can see the stream ARN then there, so we'll copy that to our notepad. Next, we'll just clear that away, and then we'll cd back into the main backend directory and run sam build. This executes the package.json file in each function, so it installs all the various libraries that are needed, and just takes a couple of minutes to complete. Afterwards, you'll see that a build succeeded message after the build is completed. Next, we need to set up Auth0. So I've logged in already into my account. What I need to do is click on the Applications menu on the left, and then select Create Application. I'm going to call my application AAM for Ask Around Me, and I'll select Single Page Web Application because it's a Vue.js app. I'll select the Settings tab in the middle. The first thing we need to do is change some of these callback URLs to point back to localhost so we can allow Auth0 to integrate with our development machine version of the application. So I'll paste those three in there and then hit Save Changes. Once that's done, we need to capture the Auth0 configuration for the front end. That's the domain and client ID. So we'll copy those two values over to our notepad. enter domain, and then the client ID as the second value. Okay, that's now captured that. So Auth0, now all you need to do is set up an API where the API audience is set to auth0-jot-authorizer. So you just hit create API and build that. So that is now ready as well. And so that is the front end piece for Auth0 all configured. The next part is to do the SAM deploy. We did the build already, and we'll use that guided flag again. We're going to call this one ask around me backend. The region is the same. I'll accept the default question table parameter. The stream ARN is this ARN we captured in the previous step. Paste that in. I'll accept the default table name for answers. The IoT data endpoint is that first value we captured. We'll paste that there. Now the Auth0 issuer is the domain with HTTPS put in before that. And then we'll just confirm and allow that to deploy. This just takes a couple of minutes. After that's deployed again, you'll see the successfully created stack message. But take a note of the API endpoint that was created as a result. We'll need this for the front-end deployment. So next we need to go to the front-end directory. And there's two files we need to change. One is the Auth Config JSON. I'll split the screen here so you can see it more clearly. I'm going to copy the domain over to the first attribute. And then the ID goes into client ID. Then the audience is the same. It should be auth0-jot-authorizer. Make sure that's the same. And we'll save those changes. Next, go into the source directory and open the main.js folder or file, and then scroll down to the configuration section. Here there's a Google Maps key you'll need to paste in. This should be kept a secret from the internet. And then you want to enter the API gateway endpoint URL that we just managed to get from the SAM deployment. So paste that in there. Pool ID is that second value we captured from Cognito. We'll paste that in. And then host is the IoT endpoint, which is the very first thing that we copied down. Paste that value in just there. Region is your region. Mine is US East 1. Yours might be different. Now don't forget to save this file, so Control S to save. And then with that in place, now we're ready to test the front end. So the first thing to do is to cd into the front end directory. And then we'll run npm install. This takes a couple of minutes because it's a fairly large number of packages for a Vue.js application. Once it's finished, just run npm run serve, and that will run the application using a local development server. Once it's ready to run, you'll be given the URL, which is the localhost URL shown on the screen here. So if we copy that URL into a browser, we can load up the local application. So I'll just paste that in there. And now I'll press F12 to open up the console, and you can see the application has successfully loaded, authenticated with Auth0, and it's also connected to API Gateway to retrieve the list of questions. So in this video, I went from just a cloned repo to a working application. We walked through setting up the backend pieces and also configuring Auth0. In the next video, I'll show you how to deploy the application to a public URL using AWS Amplify. Thanks for joining me for this brief introduction. To learn more about the Ask Around Me application, visit the GitHub repo shown on the screen. I hope to see you next time. Happy coding!